We have a love-hate relationship with habits. And what I want to talk about today is the fact that our lives are run on habits. Creating habits in alignment with what we want and believe gives us habits we can rely on. And we've been talking about prosperity and success all month, and we are talking about how to move from where we are to where we want to be, to experiencing and expressing this beautiful spark of life that Lainey so beautifully sung about, that we actually are. And to have our lives be in alignment with that and express that. And Karen so beautifully talked last week about the acceptance of the abundance of life, and to acknowledge and claim it and ask for it, speak our word about it. Are you all demonstrating it? Yes, maybe, right? And isn't that sometimes how it works? We're inspired. We absolutely get what's going on. We understand our spiritual principles. We do our inspiration. And as we talked a couple weeks ago, sometimes we have to provide a lot of sustained effort to move in the direction of that dream, right? Sustained effort in consciousness to sustained effort in action. And then we have to ask ourselves, if and when we feel like it's not manifesting, why is it not manifesting? So we're going to talk today about building a new groove. Building a new groove. And yeah, I think sometimes that we get a little impatient. We ask ourselves, why are we not demonstrating like a day or a week or a month after we've decided to shift our consciousness and experience prosperity, experience success, and we begin to ask ourselves what's going on. What I also notice is that we have this conversation. I'm fascinated by this conversation. I do it. I listen to other people do it. Well, there's a part of me that understands that the universe is abundant. But there's a part of me that is afraid, that has a limiting belief. There's a part of me that knows the truth, and there's a part of me that doesn't. And this sense of being torn between these two parts, or giving voice to these two parts, illuminates for us our spiritual truth, our spiritual identity, and our human identity that is plagued with limitation, old thoughts, old feelings, old behaviors, old beliefs. Now, I can't tell you how many people I have talked with and talked to who talk about, well, I know all this stuff, but I keep doing the same old thing. Do you ever have that experience, right? I know the truth. I know that I'm supposed to eat healthy, and I still reach for the bag of potato chips. I know that I need to decide that I live in an abundant universe, and I still get afraid when I look at, even the millions of dollars in my checking account, and it doesn't feel like enough. And we are evidencing to ourselves these old patterns and beliefs. And when people talk to me about these things, usually we have an opportunity to ask ourselves, so what's the hidden belief? What's the underlying pattern? What's the false idea? And 99% of the time, people can tell me what that is. They can. We know what it is. Really, we've been in enough classes and enough therapy, right? We know it was our mother, right? I've already been setting aside my money for Jason for his therapy, right? It's either our mother or father or whatever, wherever it comes from, we already know. We've done enough work to understand where it comes from, what's going on. And so people ask me, why am I still doing it? Karen and I had this conversation, and she said, you really have to talk about this. Why am I still doing it? It's a habit.
I'm so glad you joined us today. That makes you a part of CSLDallas, and we love that our community continues to grow. And we also love to give great spiritual content. And a way that you can participate in our community is financially give to it. It's easy to do so. Go to CSLDallas.org and hit the give button. Or you can set up a text giving mechanism at 972-954-4404, a safe and secure way to send us money whenever you watch a great message like this. So thanks for giving, and buckle up, because here comes the spiritual content.
We have a love-hate relationship with habits. And what I want to talk about today is the fact that our lives are run on habits. Creating habits in alignment with what we want and believe gives us habits we can rely on. What we normally do is focus on all the habits that are bad. I have a habit of reaching for food when I'm upset. I have a habit of spending more money than I would like to. I have a habit of being afraid. I have a habit of being anxious. I have whatever they are, right? And we spend a lot of time focusing on our negative habits. And we spend a lot of time trying to figure out what's underneath those. But our habits, we are designed to run on habits. You have to think about this. Scientists have, they have this idea that there are 6 billion, that's with a B, bits of information coming to us at any moment. 6 billion bits of information that we're taking in at any moment, at all the levels, right? Physical, senses, psychic levels, who knows? We're taking it all in. And if we had to consciously make a decision about each and every piece of information that came to us, what we're going to do about it, what we're going to think about it, how we're going to respond to it, we would need a padded cell. We would be utterly overwhelmed with dealing with all of that information. So our brain is constructed to coalesce that information into what's important and to have already designed responses to the things that are going on. Those are habits. They're the habitual ways in which we organize what's coming in and the habitual ways in which we respond to those things. And it's the way in which we manage this onslaught of information that's coming to us. So we're designed to run on habits. Your whole automatic nervous system is run on the habits that are lodged in your subconscious subjective mind. It's the habit of breathing. It's really just a habit. It's the habit of your heart beating. It's the habit that your organs have to function the way that they're supposed to function, right? All of those habits are little signals that are coming from your brain, telling all of your organs and everything what to do. And that pattern is laid down so that our whole system operates properly. We are run from top to bottom with habits. Habits in and of themselves are not good or bad. Let me rephrase that. The fact that we have habits is not good or bad. The question is, what sort of habit do we have? And are we having habits that we can rely on in alignment with the prosperity and success we want, with the spiritual life that we want to have, in alignment with the spiritual truth, or are they still running out of a groove that was created many, many, many years ago? So our lives are run on habits. What we want to do is create habits in alignment with what we want and believe. This gives us habits that we can rely on. Now, there's a powerful statement. This is a paraphrase both Thomas Troward, who was a mental scientist from the early 1900s, and the Science of Mind use. This is a paraphrase of that statement. This is how I've coalesced it into an easy way to remember this idea. What we teach in metaphysics and the science of mind is that we change a thing into a thought. We change the thought, and the law automatically changes the thing. We change a thing into a thought. We change the thought, and the law automatically changes the thing. Now, as we talked in our Science of Mind class this morning, right, thought, we use this term thought loosely. When the early metaphysicians were talking about thought, that were using the word thought, they meant a movement in consciousness. They did not mean just a cerebral, heady thing, right? A movement in consciousness is that which which uses my heart, my mind, and my body as a whole experience. My experience of something, my idea about it, my belief about it. And the shorthand word for that is thought. Change a thing into a thought. So let's break it down for a minute and ask ourselves, what does this mean and what does this have to do with habits? So we have a thing or an experience, our prosperity, our success, our love life, the quality of our relationships, our experience of our bodies, whatever it is, right? Or a specific thing that we have or don't have. We have that thing or experience. What we know is behind that is a causal reality, a causal movement in consciousness. And so that is the thought, the idea, the belief, the idea that we have about how much success we can acquire, the idea or that we can experience, the idea or the feeling of how prosperous we can actually be, or the thought that we have about whether or not we can be successful in a business venture or anybody will buy our art, right? So that what's behind the experience is this thought or belief. Our job is to change it into something new, a new thought, idea, or belief. And if you don't realize it, this is the word where the term new thought comes from. New thought is not new. It's not a new idea. This is ancient wisdom, starts with the Hermetic teachings, comes all the way through Plato and the pre-Socratics and into Jesus' teachings and Swedenborg, and we can list ancient Egypt, from ancient Egypt and the Hindus all the way up to today. There's nothing new about new thought. The term new thought means I have a new thought. And when I have a new thought, do you see, then I produce a new thing. There is a new outcome. And so our job is changing the old thought into a new thought. And we do that. We spend our time doing that. We learn to focus not on the limitation that we're experiencing, but on the abundance of the universe. We learn to focus on not on the sense of inadequacy that we feel, but on the truth that we are God, we are the divine made manifest. You see, this is the change. We stop focusing on how few customers we have or how little money we're making, and we change that into an expectation of good, an expectation of lots of customers, lots of money flowing, lots of opportunities in our business or in whatever else it may be that we are focusing on. Do you see? That is our work, to shift from an old thought, idea, belief, felt, lived experience, whatever we want to call that. The shorthand word is thought, the movement in consciousness, to a new one. And you see, the thing that we were experiencing, that is created by the law of cause and effect. It's an absolute result of this old thought that we had. Whatever that old thought is, could be a hidden belief, could be a false idea, could simply be race consciousness. We sort of accepted that, this is about how prosperous we can be. Our whole family had this level of success. That's what we're comfortable with. That's what we know. But it doesn't have to be necessarily a conscious thought or a conscious idea. But we know behind that thing is a thought. And as we change that thought, the new thing must automatically demonstrate, right? That is the law of cause and effect. That's the universal law that we practice understanding, we practice demonstrating it in our lives in little tiny things like parking places and fun little things like that, so that we can grow our understanding that the law is automatic. And if we will change the old thought to the new thought, the thing itself will change. Our experience of success and prosperity will change. Now we can, because we are very psychologized as a culture, we can spend an enormous amount of time focusing on the old thought. Why do I have it? Where did it come from? I feel so bad that I keep thinking it. I'm sorry, I feel inadequate. I just have to really work on my inadequacy. And oh my God, I have such a limited belief. I have to work on my limited beliefs. And what do you think we're doing? We are focusing on the old thought over and over and over and over again, right? Now, As I said, you have been in more than enough therapy. You've probably been in enough classes. You are getting pretty clear about the old thoughts. So our job is to stop thinking it. Now, stop thinking it is to think the new thought, experience the new internal experience, the movement in consciousness, the acceptance, the claiming of the new idea, the new truth. And when we do that, the new thing is an automatic result. Of course, we do have our part in it. You'll notice that it doesn't go from the old thing to the new thing. The work is in consciousness, but we do have our part in it. That's the move our feet part. And I think of it a little bit like as the law is automatically manifesting the new thing, doing its job with the infinite intelligence of the universe, my job is to also be moved to move the feet part, and somehow in some mysterious and wondrous ways, we call those miracles, those two things come together. And then we have this amazing experience and we go, oh my God, TSRW, this shit really works. And we're all surprised. and so this is the process that we are engaged in, right? And we learn it and we know it and we begin to build the new thought. But we keep experiencing the old thing, partly because what we have, the old thought, is we have a habit. That's all it is. We already know all there is to know about it. It is now just a habit. Right? And if we can remove any emotional content around having it, stop resisting it, blaming it, having upset around it, focusing on it, right? We could realize that when we do the very thing that's not in alignment with what we've said our new thought is, the only reason we're doing that is because it's a habit. And what do we know about habits? They can change. Habits can be changed. Absolutely. Habits can be changed. Change a thing into a thought, change the thought, and the law automatically changes the thing. What we want is to have the new thought be our habit. Do you see? That's what we're doing, because we can't possibly be conscious every moment of every day about, are we being loving, are we being successful, are we thinking about our prosperity, were we nice to our child, did we love our mother, did we meditate, did we not eat the potato chips? Do you see? It's exhausting, right? It's exhausting. It's right. So one at a time, what we're doing, the whole point of our spiritual practices, our affirmations, our visualizations, all of the things that we do on a very concrete basis is to build a new habit. Thomas Troward called in 1906, he called it creating a new groove. A groove in our brain. He literally called it a groove in our brain. Well, since that time and now, neuroscientists have begun to really understand. Yes, in fact, you have grooves in your brain. They're called the synaptic pathways. Synaptic pathways. And so what happens is that we have habitual ways of seeing things, habitual ways of perceiving things. We've learned this all. We know this from our spirituality. But they are wired into our brains. And they're wired there because we continue to work that particular pathway in our consciousness. The fact that we can, and how many of you grew up with the thing, you can't teach an old dog new tricks? Right? For years, they said, well, once it's laid down in your brain, you're stuck. Sorry, too bad. But that has become clear that is completely false. That is very false. In neuroscience, we have this new understanding of neuroplasticity. And so neuroplasticity is the technical and scientific modern 21st century term for Thomas Trower's grooves of thought. I love it. I love it when they come together. So I'm going to show you a video. So Alex, we're about ready for the video. I'm going to show you this little video on neuroplasticity. Here we go. All right, so, and why is it that we have this sense that habits are hard to change, right? They say 21 days, which I think is nonsense. I think you can change a habit in a heartbeat, and sometimes it takes, I don't know about you, but it's taken me years sometimes to change certain grooves in my consciousness, and anything in between. I don't think you put a number on how long it takes you to change a habit. I think that you can do it at any point that we are willing to be focused on it. But here's a really interesting thing. So as I was doing research for the talk, there's a fabulous book on creating successful habits. And one of the things in this book, it talks about that habits are powerful because they create neurological cravings. Habits are powerful because they create neurological cravings. A certain behavior is rewarded by the release of pleasure chemicals in the brain, regardless of the content of the habit. So what happens is there's a cue or trigger, right? A location, a person, a situation, an upset, a something. What happens is there's a cue or a trigger, and we have a routine response. We watch TV, we grab the potato chips, we storm out of the room, we hide under the covers, we start to become anxious. Whatever it is, we have a routine response. And that routine response is an outpicturing of the groove that our consciousness, our thought is following. And what happens is when we respond repeatedly and habitually in this routine manner, there is literally a reward. There's a reward in your brain, a chemical reward in your brain for doing the thing you don't want to do. Right? But think about that. By doing the work to build a new groove, to choose the fruit over the sugar, to meditate instead of, watch violent television, to decide to come from a spiritual point of view instead of from an ate an awful fearful point of view. Do you see, when that new groove is built and begins to be built, the same thing is true. When there's a trigger and there's a routine response, there is a pleasure center reward in your consciousness. And that habit begins to be the place, the very place where your body, your physical reality goes, well, that felt good. Do you see, that's the disconnect. The disconnect is in our negative habits, or the habits that don't serve us, is that there is at the end of it this feeling of, well, that felt good, which is what reinforces the habit. But we are not just habitual creatures. We are actually the one who is having the habit. We're the ones who are in charge of what's going on in our brain, what's going on in our bodies, what's going on in our emotions. And as neuroplasticity clearly shows, is that we have the ability to begin to build new grooves. We are not at the mercy of our habits. As we talked about it the other day, a few weeks ago, we talked about sustained effort. The sustained effort and the power of the discipline that comes in building these new habits. The key to sustaining positive change is to turn each desired action into a habit. So the first thing that we do is we I don't know how else to say it. We make ourselves behave. Really. Right? We take our minds and our bodies and we say, there, little girl, I know you want the potato chips, but we're going to have fruit instead. And I want the potato chips. Okay, well, am I my little girl who's going to do that? Or am I, right, the adult, the spiritual adult? And of course we can move from potato chip to I don't want to discipline my habit of spending my money. I'm afraid to go out and be successful in my business. I don't want to do the activities that are required, right? And we're the ones who have to actually make ourselves do it. We actually have to make ourselves sit down and meditate. We have to make ourselves do the affirmations. We have to choose the actions. But the good news is, in choosing the action over and over and over again, do you see that puts us in charge of the grooves in our brain? Instead of being at the mercy of that reward cycle. We're actually in charge. And yes, actually, when we first start doing it, there is no reward. Because it's not yet a habit. But the minute it starts becoming a habit, that starts having that same reward quality. And why not use that to our benefit? Right? Why not build that groove long enough till the thing that we're choosing actually provides us with that reward? Will Durant says this: we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. Now you can fill in any word for excellence. Success is what we do. Success then is not an act, but a habit. Prosperity then is not an act, but a habit. Love is not an act, but a habit. Spirituality, living in alignment with the divine presence, is not an act, it's a habit. It starts out with deliberate actions. And sometimes, of course, those actions are physical. Mostly, we're talking about the action in consciousness. The action of focusing on the new thought, of building the new groove. And it does take work and discipline. We had a wonderful lunch here last week with Armando Cantu with the Cardboard Project. And as you may know, he's he comes out of our community, built a not-for-profit, helping the homeless connect with jobs. And he's been going gangbusters now for a couple of years. He's one of our not-for-profit program partners for our quarterly tithe. And so he gave a little luncheon for the staff. Thank you for your support, and here's what's going on. And we had this fabulous conversation, and he said, I'm doing all of this because what I learned here at CSLDallas, because I learned what it means to set my mind on an intention and to build that spiritual practice and those new ways of thinking and behaving. I learned it all here, and this is why we're giving this lunch to you guys, to be grateful. And he said, I cannot tell you how many people come up to me and say, well, but wow, this happened overnight. How did this happen? And his response is, they never want to hear about the disciplined spiritual practice that it takes. They want it to be easy. They want it to be effortless. Do you see, it's easy and effortless once it's a habit. Because then we can rely on it. And we get the reward at the end of the routine. We get the stimulation reward at the end of the routine because it's become a habit. But the fact of changing that old thought into a new thought, that's the discipline. And that's the place where we engage our power of choosing. Over and over and over again. And we can't, at that point, rely on our habits because our habits are going to take us down the old groove, right? That's where the tendency is going to be. And so until it's a new habit, we have to stand guard there. And we have to decide over and over and over again. So when I first heard about grooves of thought with Thomas Troward, when I first read about that many years ago, what came to me was the image of the way water cuts through sandy ground, and it begins to build a groove. It begins to build a pathway for itself. Actually, it does this through rock, through everything. And if that water goes in that direction long enough, right, it builds a pretty good-sized groove, and all of the water goes down there. And that's like our habitual ways of thinking. And pretty soon, it's automatic. The rain comes, and it starts to move in that direction. It will automatically go down that groove. And so I began to visualize this literally as my thoughts and my intention as that water. And what if I decided to build a new groove? So the first time you think about changing your thoughts, I have my old thoughts over here. Let's make the old groove go this way. We have our new thoughts over here. And so if we have our old, if we say, I'm not going to do that, I am simply not going to go there in my consciousness. I am going to make myself think this, even though I don't feel it. I'm going to make myself think this, do this, expect this, right? I'm sending my water down this direction. Well, what happens the first time you send it down there? It spreads out, and it gets just evaporated, or it gets sucked into the ground. Nothing happens. But if I keep sending the water down there, if I keep sending it down there, it will inevitably begin to build that new groove that we saw in that neuroplasticity video that we watched, right? And at some point, the water is swirling around, and it might actually go down both grooves, because this one is starting to be built, but this one still has a pretty good space in it. So then what I imagined, I do a lot of work with my visual imagination. It helps me get a hold of these ideas. What I imagined was putting down a steel gate like you would put in an irrigation ditch. Right? If this is the irrigation ditch that's irrigating my life in a way I don't want, because that's basically what our habitual thoughts are. If this is irrigating my life in a way I don't want, I'm going to close it off. I'm going to put a steel gate down there. I'm actually not going to let any more water go down that groove. I'm just not going to do it. That takes a fair amount of discipline, right? It takes a fair amount of discipline. And so we put that steel gate in there over and over and over again, which helps the water go down this side. Well, if you've ever looked at what happens when water changes its course over time, this one starts to build, right? It gets deeper and deeper. What happens to this one? It gets filled up with leaves and rocks and sand, and and enough time passes, you can barely tell that there was ever a water course there at all. Do you see, goes back to, once we know that this water course exists, and we've had whatever revelation we need to have about it, and we've learned whatever there is to learn about it, we actually don't have to give it any more attention. Because every time we give attention to it, we're sending water down that groove and we're re-clearing it out. We don't want to clear it out. We want it to atrophy for lack of use. And so there's a profound discipline that says, I am not going there. I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to let you mind, you feelings, heart, you body get all wigged out, right? And we do our spiritual practice. We feel the feeling, we let it up and out, but we don't get caught in it. We do our spiritual practice to recenter, and we say, oh, this is what I'm going to keep focusing on. This is the new groove of thought. I'm abundant. The universe supports me. There's prosperity in my life. I love Emma's statement, there's good in the universe and I ought to have it. There's good in the universe and I ought to have it. Why? Because I am the universe made manifest as an individualized expression. There's good in the universe and you should have it. You ought to have it. Every being on the planet ought to have it. Well, any being anywhere ought to have it. Right? Because there is an unlimited good in the universe. And I get to have some of that too. There's good in the universe and I ought to have it. Right? And as I'm doing that, we're carving out that new groove. And what's the good news? Eventually, we no longer have to worry about planting our steel gate or forcing our mind down that new groove. We are literally using the way our brain works for us. We're harnessing it for the very life that we are designing and manifesting. Right? So we're the very fact that our lives run on habits, we're now using that for our own good. Only the disciplined ones are free in life. If you are undisciplined, you are a slave to your moods, and you are a slave to your passions, and I would say that you are a slave to your old thinking, to your habitual thinking. And so this is where spiritual discipline comes in. This is why we meditate. We have meditation here now five days a week, right? You can meditate. This is why our classes are so committed to teaching the tools and the practices, and why we come together in spiritual community. This is why we're in community Sunday after Sunday after Sunday after week after week after month after year. Not because you don't know it, but because we have to practice it together, and we have to be reminded. And when we build one new habit in one area of our life, success or love or relationship, then usually there's the next one that emerges. Oh, and now I want to be more spiritually grounded. Now I want to be more physically healthy. Now I want to have more love in my relationships. Now I really want to see how I can take this out into the world and not be overcome by what I see out there, but actually do good work in the world. Do you see, over and over and over and over again, we are applying exactly the same principles and the same ideas, but we're practicing it in consistent, disciplined manner. So I know that's not a very sexy conversation. But here's the thing. Here's what I know to be true. Discipline is the heart of freedom. Discipline is the root of freedom. We will not be free of our old habits until we are disciplined enough to make new ones. So I want us to make friends with discipline, not like being disciplined, like punished or any of those kinds of things, but think of a marathon runner. Think of Lainey singing, Oscar on his violin, Scott on the piano. We've seen Matt and Jonathan for years, right? They practice the discipline of becoming that good at something. That's the kind of discipline, the intentional over and over and over again use of our principles and our tools and techniques to build these new grooves. So that when you wake up in the morning, your habit is, wow, what a great day. I wonder what's going to happen today. I wonder what good I can do in the world today. I wonder how my life is going to be a light today. Do you see? What an amazing thing. And we can build that habit, building new grooves in our consciousness. So in support of our prosperity and our success, let's focus on building these new grooves. I love this quote from Helen Keller. I want to close with it. The place between your comfort zone and your dreams is where life takes place. But we can't get out of our comfort zone until we're willing to do the work and we're willing to go for it. That's where life takes place. That's the juice. That's the juice of life and the joy when we can look back and say, oh my God, look how different my life is than it was 5 years ago, right? Not this month, not this week, not this hour, but last year, 5 years ago, to see how different our lives are unfolding because our habits are in support of our spiritual truth. So let us pray. Actually, we're not going to pray. We're going to stand up. I'm going to invite you to stand up. If you would repeat after me. Today I build a new groove. I think a new thought. I have a new idea. And I trust the law in supporting me. And so it is. Thank you. You may be seated.